So why don't we start by just going down the line, and everyone can just introduce yourselves and what brought you here, what your film is.
Hi, I'm Sharon Liese, and I'm the co-director of Parker.
Hi, I'm Alice Hughes. I'm one of the producers of Puffling.
Hi, I'm Jessica Bishop. I'm the director of Puffling.
Hi, I'm Daniel Lombroso. I'm the director of Nina and Red. I'm also in the film.
Hello, I'm Jeremy Workman. I'm one of the directors of Deciding Vote.
And I'm Rob Lyons. I'm the other director of Deciding Vote.
And I'm Catherine Hoffman. I'm a co-director on Parker.
Okay, so these 5 films have such an incredible range of subjects, and as like journalists, documentary filmmakers are nothing without a great subject. So I want to start by asking you all about how you found and why you chose your subjects. And I think it would be best to go in the order that we just saw these films. So let's start with Parker. You guys are sitting so far.
We're miles away.
All right, well, in surround sound, tell us a little bit about how you found this absolutely delightful family, the Parkers, and why their story of changing their name spoke to you and felt like a film.
I do the first part. So Adolphus Parker, who is the patriarch of the family, he's a house painter, and he's painted many rooms in my house over at least 15 years. And every time he does a different room, I have a conversation with him, because as we do, we're storytellers. So I like to hear what has happened to him. And so in his life, he was in Vietnam and grew up in Mississippi, and so always wanted to know, like, what story can I tell about you? And then one day he started talking about this name change. And at that point I was like, this is the story I'm going to tell about you. I know I've threatened, but this is the one. And I'm going to let Catherine tell how she got involved.
Yeah, so we were both living in Kansas City at the time, and I was under a lot of pressure at the time. Folks were saying, if I wanted to be a filmmaker, I had to live in New York or LA. And I, smack in the middle of the country, and I just felt like there had to be a way to tell stories, in the community that I was already a part of. And so I saw Sharon doing exactly that, and so I kind of just bugged her over and over and asked her to teach me, how she was doing what she was doing. And so we just kind of got to chatting, and eventually she said, there's a story I think that you'd be interested in, and sent me some footage, and right away their love and humor and joy just wrote me right in. So.
Were they immediately receptive, the whole family, or did it take some convincing?
Well, that's really interesting, because Adolphus was interested at first, but as you can see in the film, the grandkids didn't even know about it until they were told that they were going to change their name, and they're doing a documentary about it. So at first they were a little skeptical, but they really kind of grew to enjoy telling their story. But as most characters in your stories do, they say, well, why is that important? Like, nobody's really interested in this. And you're like, oh yeah, people are very interested.
Terrific. Let's move on to Deciding Vote. So Robert and Jeremy, this politician is, sort of lost to time, George Michaels. How did you find out about him, and what spoke to you about this one vote of his?
Well, I could start and you could follow up. I wish I could say that I discovered this and found this and, poured through old newspaper articles to find George Michaels, but pretty much everybody that was from our generation and younger, nobody had heard of him, and I certainly hadn't. And I think it was originally I had another film playing in a theater, and a man came up to me, this wonderful man who wasn't a filmmaker, and he was just sort of bending my ear about, you have to know this story. And it sort of reminded me that, storytellers sort of come in all ways, and he sort of implored me to listen to him about this and how relevant it was, And I wasn't sure about any of this and whether we were the right filmmakers. And then I connected, I'd done a lot of stuff with Rob, and we had sort of felt like this was such an important story that we wanted to figure out how to do it, really. And that was the genesis.
And then Duran came into our office and showed us that grainy clip. It was a YouTube clip that we first saw of George Michael's speech, and it just struck us that we'd never seen anything like this before. No politician in our time, we felt, had that kind of conviction or moral courage. And so we went on this huge archival research endeavor and have an archival producer, Melissa Jacobson, who helped us through that, and an amazing editor, Kristen Bai, who helped us really pull the story out of all of this amazing archive. That it was a huge story at the time, over 50 years ago, and then it had gotten forgotten under the coverage of Roe, and now sadly we find ourselves right back at this exact same spot.
Well, when you had this idea, was it before or after the Supreme Court decision?
What's so interesting, and it also just reminds you like how sometimes these movies get made. We made this is a 20-minute movie, a 19-minute movie. We made it over 3 years. So it wasn't something that we just, kind of cranked out really quickly after, everything was under assault again. I mean, we were working on this, pre-pandemic, and I think that the time that it allotted us a lot of time to really find that archival that was so difficult to track down. Obviously it was very much in the thoughts of our thoughts and our team, but it gestated for so long that it was amazing watching that transformation going on in our country.
Yeah, we were talking about trying to do it for the 50th anniversary of this vote specifically, and then, the Dobbs decision was well after that, and we were as surprised as anybody at that moment, and brought us to today. And we're right back in the 1970s, it feels like.
Wow. So for Liturgy of Anti-Tank Obstacles, obviously we don't have Dimitro, who we saw in a video, but we do have the producer of the film, and Daniel Lombroso. So maybe we can hear a little bit from you, Daniel, about how the New Yorker and Dimitro found each other.
Yeah, so the war broke out almost 2 years ago now, which is hard to believe, and our small but mighty team at the New Yorker felt the journalistic imperative to do something. Everyone was running to the front lines, and of course the reporting is important, but A, for safety reasons, and B, cinematically, we thought it was interesting to try something that was different. So we reached out to filmmakers in Kyiv, starting with a producer named Daria Basil. She's fantastic, and she had an active spreadsheet of all the productions in Ukraine. So our team just very diligently just went down the list and started talking to filmmakers. It's very important for us to work with the Ukrainian director and amplify them in that moment. And then we met Dimitro, and such a character, such an auteur. He has a film called Pamphir that just came out that's fantastic. It was in Cannes last year. And he pitched us a vision of the war that we hadn't heard about, sculpture artists who retrained to build anti-tank defenses, and just felt so strange and conceptual and, no dialogue and very risky. And I think all of us were like, wow, what a risk. And then TIFF called us and we got into TIFF and we were like, okay, we're fine. So at that point, we knew we had something. But, it was really, trusting someone and then helping them shape it. And Dimitri and I probably spoke on the phone 400 times over the past year and a half making that film. I've never met him, which is crazy.
Did he tell you a little bit about how he found these sculptors? Like, how did he come across this story? Do you know?
Yeah, he lives in Kyiv, and, the whole arts, everyone moved to Western Ukraine, and he's actually originally from near Lviv, and these sculptors live near Lviv. So he encountered them working for Babylon 13, which is a collection of Ukrainian filmmakers that formed during the Maidan Revolution 10 years ago when they overthrew Yanukovych. So he was working on a different film and interviewed these sculptors and said, these guys are interesting. And then right around then we were connected and went from there. Yeah.
All right, I've been waiting my whole life to say this. Let's talk about pufflings. Jessica and Alice, first of all, how did you come across this island off of Iceland? How did you find these teenagers who are saving adorable pufflings?
Well, maybe you can tell from my accent, I'm sadly not from Iceland. I'm originally from the UK. However, I have a friend, Hind, who is from the Icelandic community in the film, Vestmannaeyjar, and we were on holiday together and on a really long bus journey, and we were sharing stories of home. That's where I heard about the young people on the island rescuing the puffins, and how it was a tradition that had been going on for many years. And I was really moved and curious about this sort of really innate relationship that the young people have with the wildlife on the island. They know how to hold the birds, how to care for the birds, weigh them, release them, the right places to release them. And they've been doing this, most of them, since they were about 2. And I just thought that was incredibly interesting. I didn't immediately think it was a film. It took until the sort of pandemic in 2020 when we had a bit more time to think and pause, and wildlife and nature became more and more relevant to me in my life. And together with Hind, we started researching the tradition more and the sort of science behind it. And then together with Hind, we started meeting young people on the island. I was meeting lots and lots of teenagers remotely through Zoom, getting to know them, and that's how I met Berta and Selma, who are in the film. And then also at that point, that's when Alice and also our other UK producer, Ganesh Raja, came onto the project.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of said it all really, but yeah, it was 2020, we were, me and Jess were sort of going on long walks, discussing things, discussing films. She told me about this idea, and it just, I mean, the story in itself is just magical, you know, what they're doing, and it was something which, you know, I could immediately just see the parallels between the teenagers' journeys and the puffins' journeys, and how they interact with each other, and yeah, just could really relate to it, and just thought it was just something, you know, immediately felt like something I really wanted to make.
Jessica, I'm going to ask you another question that's a sort of point of personal privilege. I want to know, did you get to hold a puffin?
I got to hold more than one. Yes, with gloves. You're meant to hold them with gloves, and sadly I didn't get to sort of find and rescue my own puffling. That's an art. Like watching the young people, spotting them, managing to catch them and then put them in the boxes. A complete art that I didn't manage to master, but as I said, they've been doing it since they were 2. But I did manage to release them, and I learnt the technique. So you see them flapping their wings because they've never flown before. The teenagers spot them because they're sort of nested in the hills or the mountains around the community, and they sort of catapult themselves into town, towards the town lights. And so the teenagers are sort of looking at the skies for like white dots at night, and that's how they sort of capture them in the grass, and in these places on roofs and things like this. So I was never going to be able to spot them, but I was able to release a few. And as it's their first flight, you have to make sure their wings are sort of outside of your hands and make sure you're sort of bouncing them almost so that they start flapping before you lob them off the cliff.
That's too cute. Daniel, obviously your subject was someone you've known your whole life, your grandmother, Nina. But it sounds like she hadn't been very forthcoming about the fact that she even ever had a sister. Miranda, how did you first find out about your grandmother's sister?
You know, I knew, but I didn't know. And what I mean by that is I think all families have secrets, and there are things that we talk about and things we don't talk about. And her piano, which you see at the end, is littered with the life that pictures of the life she rebuilt in America. 2 kids, 5 grandkids. 6 grandkids, 5 great-grandkids. And in the middle is a little cutout picture of her sister Irena, And I've spent so much time at her house, and I never asked her who that was, ever. My grandfather and her were they met on Brighton Beach at Bay 2, which I discovered was the pickup beach. So when I walk by there now, I always think about that. It's still a picture. Jeremy says it's still a pickup beach. It was in 1951. And my grandparents were married for 60 years until my grandfather died, and he never asked her. I mean, of course we knew she was a Holocaust survivor, and her experience has informed a lot of I do a lot of work on far-right extremism. I did a feature film called White Noise, where I spent 4 years embedded with white nationalists and neo-Nazis, and a lot of that work is inspired by her. But I never sat down and asked her what happened, and I thought it was just me, but it turns out really no one in my family ever did.
And how was the approach when she's a little spicy at the beginning? What was it like when you first told her, I want to make a movie about you and interview you?
I remember well, I called her and she said, "There's no story here." And I said, "Come on." And she said, it's like converting to Judaism, you have to go 3 times. And the third time she said, "Okay, fine, you can come over." So the third time we went, and I went with Devin, the amazing producer who's here, and a small crew, just a DP and an assistant, and we lived with her for a week, and then we shot her 90th birthday party that you see at the end. And, she had one rule, which was not following her into the shower. That was the only thing. My mom came and people said, "Oh, she seems annoyed." I said, it's like cinematic gold. Like, she's so funny and rich and lives this completely independent life. She plays bridge 5 times. The fact checkers have to check a story that I'm writing, and I said she's at bridge all day, so you have to call her in the morning or at night. I mean, she's still fully independent. She's doing yoga at home with me sometimes. And, I wanted to capture that, her amazing contemporary experience, but also, the life that she left behind.
So we've now heard about your subjects, but of course these are also works of art, and I want to ask each of you a question about style, because these films are all the result of a lot of aesthetic decisions. And so going on back to Parker, Sharon and Catherine, one thing I really loved is the motif of the sort of animated lines that sort of resemble, hand-drawn, signatures. Can you tell me a little bit about how that evolved and how it came to be?
Well, thanks for noticing that it was like emblematic of autographs, because that was really important to us. But what we knew we wanted to exemplify this joy and kind of the fun and playfulness of the Parkers. So we were looking for a technique that we could do this with, and also kind of put the naming kind of stuff in there. And Catherine had this wonderful idea.
It's one of my, I'm obsessed with the 70s. I love everything 70s. And one of my comfort movies is Almost Famous. And in the...
That's a 90s movie.
Set in the 70s,
Oh.
yes. And so in the opening sequence, like in the title sequence, he's, it's a kid journalist, and he's handwriting out the credits for the film. And so I was just watching that late one night and just loved the handwritten aspect of that. And I was thinking, about how names and signatures are, so important to this film. And so I thought it might be fun to, incorporate that and show, the physical signature and how that's going to change, and, the personal aspect of handwriting. And then, like Sharon said, just looking for more ways to bring in play and joy and communicate that visually. So that's where that kind of came.
Well, and then it works so well with the music too, which has a lot of joy. This jazz soundtrack. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, so love jazz. So if you don't already know Kansas City, barbecue, jazz, Chiefs. That's pretty much it. And I guess Taylor Swift now as well. But and so jazz is huge. And so we had originally some music from Charlie Parker, who's a Kansas City jazz legend. And so you hear the lilting and the playfulness and the back and forth, and how that really kind of represents the Parkers, really. And I love how the grandparents still flirt with each other, and they still have that fun back and forth. And so it was just looking for ways to bring that in.
That is So Robert and Jeremy, obviously, so much of Deciding Vote is told through archival footage. Can you tell us a little bit about how your hunt for the archival footage, and specifically, was there anything that was really hard to find, or anything that you sort of found and had this eureka moment that was so great? Yeah, a little bit about.
Well, again, we had this woman, Melissa, who helped us find a lot of that material, and the debate was just amazing to us to look back at a lot of the because there was a lot of coverage around the vote, but the weeks leading up to it, there was a lot of debate, and the vote actually happened twice. The first time it stopped in a technicality. It was technicality, they had to re-vote, and it was a second opportunity to do it. And just the debate was really fascinating to us. That this was so seeing how the modern day debate is so polarized, and this was a bipartisan bill. It was a Republican woman who had initiated Constance Cook, and just seeing the debate and how it's been manipulated, I feel like, over the last 50 years, and the religious right has really taken it in a way that doesn't represent the majority of people in our country. And it was just fascinating looking at that and watching this debate happen, unfold, and knowing that it was so in the zeitgeist, and the debate was happening again. It was just wild to see that, and it was just so much more thoughtful. Even though there was disagreement, it was just a different time, and so that was amazing. It's this they were shooting on film in these chambers, and we couldn't find one camera that had the whole speech, so it's all patched together from ABC and CBS that were in the chamber there. But it was just amazing to sort of re-listen to this debate and the thoughtfulness of it at that time.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, it was a long process of finding all that footage, and I think that's what also dictated a lot of the style for us. Like, we felt like this is amazing already, and these people are amazing, and this family is amazing, and this George Michael's, his decision was incredible, that in some ways our job was just to kind of present it as straightforward as we could, in a way, and let the material do that talking for us. And I think that his speech is so it's so impactful that we really did have a lot of conversations about really kind of just letting that material be on its own, and I think that's how we kind of structured it in our mind.
Well, and we almost did make it purely archival, but then we met Jim and Sarah, and we were so blown away by them and their influence on this. You kind of hear it in the speech, but to hear the kitchen table conversations behind the scenes was just amazing, and we felt like they needed to be included in the film, and Lee as well, and then Becca, who's one of the grandchildren.
Did some of the footage come directly from the family?
Not
so
much. Yeah, not as much as you'd think. It was a lot of just really digging through archival. There's a number of places. Vanderbilt, for example, is this depository of a lot of the reproductive rights history, and we would go. We were able to get a lot of footage from that, and we sort of dove really deep on a lot of sort of news and documentary stories from the lot of periods, in the 90s there was a lot that was presented on this story. Not just George Michael's, more of the 1970 bill. And it just was, it took a long time, and it was a process that, we just saw the finished film. It was something that we were like chasing down material, as of like a couple weeks ago. Literally, in terms of finalizing, it's been that much of an arduous task.
Well, and the family did not have much. They didn't even have family photos, and so the museum and the archivist that you see in the film, she really is painstakingly preserving this stuff that was donated by the campaign. So all the campaign materials and even the family photos, she's the one who has them, not the family. So the family's been really excited and so great to work with, and they've really loved the film and been really supportive of it. So it's been really great to give it back to them. And there's, George Michael has a ton of granddaughters and great-granddaughters now who are so proud of him and excited, and he endured a lot of pain and suffering because of his decision, but it's really borne out over, generations now. They're so proud of him and really love the film. So we're excited about that.
Cool. So going back to Daniel and liturgy of anti-tank obstacles, one thing that really struck me about how Dimitro made the film was the use of sound. Nothing is explained, but we're hearing all this diegetic sound, whether it's the air raid sirens or the radio or like the choral music. Is there anything you can tell us about that? Is that something you were discussing with him as he was making it?
Sure. Sound is central to the film. I mean, there's basically no context. You don't know where you are in Ukraine. You don't know the names of the subjects. And the only kind of expositional details you have in the film are the radio that they're listening to. And the idea is sort of to kind of present the everyday reality of Ukraine. That if you're living there, you're working in a sculpture workshop, that's what you would be hearing is about what's happening at the front, or whether you have to go to a bomb shelter or come back from a bomb shelter. So we wanted to simulate that existence as much as possible. The other sort of important thing we talked a lot about is making a war film without showing any violence or blood. That was sort of kind of a challenge for us. And you see the front a lot. You see the anti-tank obstacle. But the real way you feel the war is through sound, is through the sirens, that there are constant air raid alerts. And, even I think the best illustration is at the end of the film. It's actually it's around Easter in a small town, so it's an Easter prayer. And then the kids roll down the hill and it's beautiful and it seems like life is back to normal, but in the distance, the sirens start again. So that's kind of a juxtaposition that we talked a lot about.
Fabulous. So for Hoffman, one of the things that stood out to me was that there are these shots, the kind of beautiful landscape of this island, but there's also a lot of footage of just, the indoor pool and the, ice cream parlor, and you're driving around at night with them, and it's kind of like rainy and gross. I mean, but then you go back to the beautiful cliffs and sea. So how did you think about that? About how to sort of present these two sides of the island life?
Yeah, we were balancing a lot of different threads, both whilst we were shooting and also in the edit. Something that I wanted to explore was the sort of, I guess, the three different characters that we have present in the film. So there's the character in the arc of the Pufflings, there's the character in the arc of the island, and then there's the kind of human characters. And so we were it was always an interesting balance that we were experimenting with, spending time with Berta and Selma, and capturing their lives and looking for the moments in their lives that really tied them to the island, to really show how connected they are to the environment. So I know we're inside the pool with Berta, but we're looking through the window behind her, and there's the volcanoes in the background, and she's talking about whether she can stay on the island. And obviously on Vesmina in the 70s there was a volcanic eruption that forced half of the island to leave. So everyone on the island, along with the wildlife, they're all very much interconnected, and that's something that we were trying to showcase, all these different threads, and it was really tricky in the edit to really balance them. And the Puffling arc is the sort of main guiding story, sort of happening over one night, and then simultaneously we're sort of diving into their inner lives, their characters that are existing on another timeline. But yeah, we actually we obviously started working on the film in 2020. We were going to film Puffling season in 2020. So Puffling season only occurs for about 2 weeks every year, across August and September. And just as we were about to shoot, Iceland unfortunately went into lockdown. So then we had to wait for Puffling season 2021. And then spent sort of, I think about a week or just over a week filming with the girls at night. And we were just doing back-to-back night shoots because we just didn't know if we were going to ever be able to come back and film sort of other elements. But then luckily we did manage to go back in 2022, Puffling season, and then we shot more of the interiors and the kind of other aspects of the young women's lives to really tie their coming of age story with that of the Pufflings and really pull out the similarities and the parallels.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was curious, did that, the sort of analogy between them and the Pufflings, was that something that you knew going in was going to be part of the movie, or is that just a result of having to film it over the course of this extended period of time that it kind of became apparent?
It was the guiding concept from the start. When I first heard about the tradition and the natural phenomena, the more I thought about it, the more I was thinking, how could I tell a story about this? It felt like a story that was so important today, even though this is a tradition that's been happening since the 1800s or since electric lighting on the island. It's more and more relevant today because seabirds are at the most at risk of climate change and warming sea temperatures. So the story is as relevant today as it has ever been. And I've just lost my train of thought. But yeah.
Well, we were talking about like the, you know, bringing out the coming of age story.
Yes,
as well.
yes. So that was a concept from the beginning. The more I researched it, the more I realised that Puffins were going through a natural coming of age arc themselves, and so that was a kind of a frame that guided everything and our choices.
Yeah, and as Jess said, I mean, it was something we've made over 2 Puffling seasons, which. You know, and the first one, it was kind of like really kind of guerrilla style, going out, just shooting what we can. They came back and they were like, you know, it was not what we were expecting. I mean, Pufflings were literally just dropping from the sky, and then it'd be like Puffling jumping out the car and having to like run and try and find it and everything. But in a way, we then, you know, we came back with the footage and like, what do we have? You know, took some time to go through interviews, we did as well. Really sort of, it was actually a really useful process because it meant we could really kind of develop that and kind of have more of an understanding of the arcs of the young women as well, and how that interplays with the stories of the Pufflings, and yeah, and went out and could go out with a bit more focus a second time around.
Yeah, I just something to add. I mean, obviously Selma's clear story that came out through the film is the fact that she is trying to make this choice whether to leave the island or not, which mirrors that of the Puffling's journey. And with Berta, it's all about her connection to the environment and how her family and her livelihood depends on the environment and the fishing industry, and obviously she wants to remain on the island and thrive on the island in the same way that the Puffins' livelihood relies on the environment as well. But when we were filming, there were sort of other threads that we could follow in their lives, and through the editing process we decided that having those sort of slightly clearer lines for their stories made the film and the parallel even stronger.
And then Daniel, so obviously the story at the heart of Nina and Orana is a horrifying Holocaust story, but we also get these really delightful, funny moments of seeing her life, whether it's or just sort of casual ones like refilling her bird feeder, or you know, you helping her with Netflix. How did you think about those moments, and specifically how did you think about entering the film yourself and how you were going to be a character in it? I think, you know, it's hard to forget the scene of you and your grandmother doing yoga together. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
Frankly, I was nervous about it. I've never done a personal film. Even the film White Noise, when I spent 4 years with white supremacists, you don't know that the filmmaker is Jewish, let alone the grandson of actually two Holocaust survivors, both my grandmothers. So I got a note from someone early to try, and it was kind of easy because I guess I was playing myself in a way. But you know, I'm not a particularly dimensional character. Maybe in real life I am, I hope. But in the film, I'm just supposed to be the grandson, right? It's almost an archetype, and that's supposed to allow the audience to project themselves onto me. You know, that they could see themselves in their own grandmother, grandson, or grandmother, whatever, granddaughter relationship. And you know, that kind of intimacy is supposed to carry through the film, the intimate bond that we have with each other and having a conversation. So even those close-ups, which are very intense and intentional, are meant to kind of show that I was right there with her having that conversation. You know, the other thing stylistically we thought a lot about is silence. You know, the film is a lot about silence and breaking silence. So that's something that pervaded, you know, every aspect of production. We wanted to capture her silence at home. You know, she's an older woman who has lived alone for 15 years. So, you know, eating an ice cream alone in her kitchen, there's a shot of her doing that, or making the bed, or things. And you know, if my mom doesn't visit, or if I don't visit, and she guilts me at the end, you know, she'll be there alone. And you know, that you know, silence I think was important. And we looked for frames, I think, especially that emphasize that. But then, of course, also the breaking of the silence, that like, even though from the ashes of the Holocaust, she rebuilt this amazing family, and it was important to end with something that captured the vibrancy. So the last shot, you know, is the entire family, and the family tree, you know, rebuilt from there. So it was important to kind of capture the complexity that there's a lot of Holocaust fatigue, and when people hear Holocaust film, they think it's going to be sad. And I really want to capture the richness of her life in all of its color.